All right, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our second president, John Adams. This is coming smack dab in the middle of our foreign policy unit because John Adams sort of takes Washington's ideas of what our foreign policy should be, and he certainly expands on them. And so, before we take a step forward and take a look at what John Adams did, let's take just kind of an overall look at who John Adams was as a president. You can see here 1797 to 1801. These are the 4 years that he was in office as president, though he was involved very early on with the Revolutionary War, as you'll see here. I'm going to go through these slides somewhat fast, so if you want at any point to stop the video and copy some of this stuff down, go for it. I'm just warning you now, though, there's a lot of slides, so don't feel like you have to copy down every single word from each one. It's just more context than anything else. All right, so who was John Adams? He was everything that's set up here. He was a farmer, then a lawyer, then a statesman, and then a president. As you can see here from how he's portrayed in this artistic rendition, he was somewhat of a serious guy, not reputed to have a sense of humor, but very intelligent, and a uh, very good lawyer, very good writer too. John Adams was a Puritan, having come to Massachusetts in the middle of the 17th century. So he's a New Englander. The Adams family was not the wealthiest of families, but wasn't poor by any means. Also, John Adams spent a great deal of time in his youth reading and studying, thus sort of laying the groundwork for his work as a lawyer. He was close to his parents, though a little closer to his mother, it is said, than his father. And so, a lot of historians sort of psychoanalyze him to being that's sort of where his abrasive nature comes from, his somewhat contentious relationship with his father. As a young boy, he studied with local teachers. He earned a bachelor's degree very young at the age of 20, spoke these three different languages, and then becomes a lawyer at the age of 23. You can see the years here that he is sort of, wandering America in, and this is, of course, pre-Revolutionary War. So he is aware of what's going on. Other than, of course, John Adams now being the name of beer, what he's most known for is probably his marriage to his wife. And actually, as I say that, I'm thinking back now. Actually, Sam Adams is the name of the beer, not John Adams. So sorry, scratch that. Sam Adams. Sam Adams was the mayor of Boston at the time. I mixed the two up. Sorry. So anyway, back to Abigail Smith here. So Adams married Abigail Smith in 1764. She was rich. Okay, so she was very prominent in the social scene. She was extremely intelligent, witty, a very, very, very good letter writer. In fact, the things that we know about them as a couple come largely from the love letters they wrote to each other. This relationship is a hallmark relationship in early American history. And if you've ever read the letters between the two, you get the sense of what sort of deep love and devotion they had for each other. John Adams, again, very prominent lawyer, wanted to really understand our laws. He thought they were extremely important, that they would be followed. He, in fact, was a lawyer during the Boston Massacre. He defended the British soldiers because he had heard, what he thought was the truth, and that it was the Americans who actually started the whole thing. And so he thought that the British had deserved a fair trial, and he in fact defended them. So this, even though many Americans disagreed with his willingness to do that, this earned him a reputation as an extremely fair man. You can see here his sort of rise through the political ranks. 1768, he becomes a member of the legislature. 74 and 75. He's in both Continental Congresses, so he is prominent in the debates surrounding not only the Articles of Confederation but the Constitution. 78, he gets sent over to France to be an ambassador, so now he's picking up some international flair. Back in 79, he's taking care of Massachusetts. You can see here in the 1780s, he's bouncing around the Netherlands and England. 1789, once the office of the president is created, he becomes George Washington's first vice president. And then there you see, in 97, 1801, he is the president. Okay. He is the one that had Washington's ear as it pertained to the Continental Army. And he also, because of his dealings with the French here, helped gain French loans military support during the Revolution. So if you remember back to our discussion of the Revolutionary War, it was with French help that we were able to pull that out. So without John Adams, this sort of French alliance here might not have happened. His personality, again, not the most friendly of guys. I can't say that necessarily you would have been friends with him or that you would have even liked him, but you would have definitely been aware of how smart he was, and you would have definitely been aware of how ambitious he was. He did not pretend to be anything else. He also though had an ability to be a great speaker. This is depicted in there's an HBO miniseries called John Adams, and the things that I remember from that series largely are the speeches he makes in public. He's a very eloquent speaker in public, but like it says here in the last bullet point, a little too opinionated for people, so probably does not make the best politician. As far as his presidency goes, he had a pretty difficult time to be president. I mean, think about this, right? You know Washington, you know Jefferson, you know Madison writes the Constitution. You've heard of the Monroe Doctrine, hopefully. I mean, there are any number of our first 10 to 12 presidents that you have a fairly good idea of. John Adams, not so much. In fact, in D.C., there's no monument resurrected to John Adams. It makes you sort of wonder how and why historians have sort of skipped John Adams' presidency. But here you go. Here are potentially some reasons why. I mean, he was an extremely partisan politician. He was a strong Federalist, hated the Democratic Republicans, um, and he had some, at the time, foreign policy snafus, which I'm going to talk about in the next video. I'm going to mention the XYZ affair. You already know a little bit about the Alien and Sedition Acts, the quasi war. I'm also going to talk about in the next video. But just to refresh on the Alien and Sedition Acts, he wanted to make himself and his Federalist people stronger by sort of censoring the opposition. All right, so in a sort of Trumpian way, he wanted to silence the press and silence his critics, and also get rid of the people who he did not consider truly "quote unquote" American. So you can see here, this is a somewhat unpopular view. Here you see here on the left some of the good things about his presidency, and here you see some of the bad. Alien and Sedition Acts. Midnight Judges is something I'm going to talk about again a little bit in the future. I'm going to table that for a little bit later. Very interesting kind of backhanded thing he does. But he does favor peace. He keeps the United States out of war with France, so that's certainly a good thing. Adams is, however, when it's all said and done, considered to be a prominent founding father. He was prominent in the authorship of the Declaration of Independence. He, again, secured aid from France and helping the war out. He was firmly against slavery at a time when this was not the norm. So that should be right. That should also be brought to the forefront. That people like Washington and Jefferson, were sort of politically against the idea of slavery. They were hypocritical in the fact that they did own slaves themselves. Adams never did, and he was firmly against it. Uh, as his life came to an end, he becomes obviously a supporter of abolition because he's against slavery. He reconciles his bitterness with Thomas Jefferson. He wasn't that close with his son, John Quincy Adams, but he does end up advising him. John Quincy Adams ends up becoming is it the sixth president? Sixth or seventh? I should probably know that. Sixth or seventh president. And then John Adams promptly dies on the 4th of July, of all days, in 1826. His last words are reported as Thomas Jefferson still survives, and he doesn't know that actually Thomas Jefferson would die that same day. In fact, later in their old age, Jefferson and Adams made a habit of keeping in contact and repairing their relationship with each other. Remember, Adams was a prominent Federalist, and Jefferson, of course, prominent Republican, so they were at political odds for most of their lives. Kind of poetic, though. They both died on July 4th. The thing that will probably last the test of time, again, is here you go, the love story with him and his wife. Of course, his son, John Quincy, also becomes president. And then John Adams' vice president is none other than Aaron Burr. And Aaron Burr, of course, will come back into play a little bit later. So there you go. Did it. 10 minutes. 10 minutes on John Adams. So we'll talk a little bit about John Adams' foreign policy on the next video. But thanks for watching this one.